At first, no one noticed. It was too small to matter, too strange to understand. Someone forgot where they parked their car. Another person couldn't recognize their own street. Someone else heard a familiar voice and didn't know who it belonged to. It happens. People forget things. But then the pattern appeared. Every single time, before it happened, there were birds. Not normal birds. People described them the same way. Too bright, too detailed, almost sharper than reality itself. One man said the bird was staring at him, not like an animal, like it was watching. Seconds later, he forgot where he was going. A woman saw a bird with perfectly circular feathers, symmetrical, still. Minutes later, she couldn't remember her daughter's face. At first, it was dismissed. Stress, fatigue, coincidence. But the data kept growing, and someone realized something important. The problem wasn't memory. The problem was disappearance. Not forgetting something, but something being removed, as if it never existed at all. And every time it happened, a bird was there, watching, waiting, and then something was gone. When they checked the cameras, everything got worse, much worse. At first, everything looked normal, people walking, talking, moving, and then a pause. Not a glitch, not a recording error, a pause inside reality itself. The person would stop, completely still, for a few seconds, and then continue, as if nothing happened. But when they looked closer, every single time, a bird was nearby. Sometimes on a branch, sometimes on the ground, sometimes too close. One recording changed everything. A man walking through a forest. He stops. In front of him, a bird, bright, unnaturally clear. It doesn't move. And then, something shifts. The image doesn't glitch. It misaligns. Like reality itself moved slightly out of place. And when it returns, the man takes a step forward. But the branch where the bird stood is gone. Not broken. Not fallen. Gone. As if it had never been there. And then they noticed something even worse. The footprints behind him were missing one step, one moment, erased, like it never happened. That's when they understood. The birds weren't just watching. They were changing things, removing things, correcting something. And no one knew why. They started tracking the birds. Not visually. That was impossible. Cameras didn't always capture them correctly. Sometimes they were there. Sometimes they weren't. Sometimes they appeared different. So they tracked the effects instead. Missing time, missing objects, missing memories. And slowly, a map began to form. The incidents weren't random. They followed a pattern, a path. Like something was moving across the world, step by step, leaving gaps behind it. And at the center of that pattern, there was always one thing. The same type of bird. But no one could agree on what it looked like. Some said it had impossible colors. Others said it looked completely normal, until you stared too long. One person described it as perfect. Not beautiful, perfect, too perfect. As if it wasn't supposed to exist in this world. That's when they gave it a name. Not officially, but it spread. The correction bird. Because wherever it appeared, something changed. Something disappeared. Something was corrected. And then someone made a mistake. They tried to follow one. In real time. And that's when everything broke. The man knew what he was doing. He wasn't curious. He was careful. He had studied the patterns for weeks. He knew when it would appear. He knew where. A quiet forest. Same location as before. Same time. Same conditions. And when it happened, he didn't move. The bird landed on a branch in front of him, exactly as predicted. It looked simple, small, still, silent. But something felt wrong. The air felt heavier, like the world itself was holding its breath. The man didn't blink. He didn't step closer. He just watched. And then, the bird turned its head, slowly, and looked directly at him, not past him, not through him, at him. That was not supposed to happen. The reports never mentioned interaction, only observation, only presence. But this was different. And then, the man realized something terrifying. The bird wasn't observing the world. It was observing him, specifically him. Like it had noticed something that didn't belong. And then, everything stopped. Not just him. Everything. The wind, the leaves, the sound, silence, complete silence. And in that silence, the bird moved, and reality shifted. When the world returned, something was missing. At first, he didn't understand. Everything looked the same. The forest, the trees, the branch. But something felt wrong. Like a word on the tip of your tongue. Like a memory you can't reach. And then he noticed it. His hand. He raised it slowly. Something was off. His fingers were different. Not gone. Not damaged. Just fewer. And the worst part, he couldn't remember how many there used to be. He tried to count, but the number didn't feel wrong. It felt normal, as if it had always been this way. And that's when the panic started. Not because something changed, but because his mind accepted it, immediately, without question. Like the correction wasn't just physical, it rewrote memory too. Rewrote reality. Rewrote him. And then, he heard something. Not a sound. A thought. Not his own. Clear. Cold. Precise. You were not supposed to notice. And the bird was still watching. He ran. Instinct. Nothing else mattered. Not logic. Not data. Not understanding. Just distance. He needed to get away. But the forest felt different now. Too quiet. Too still. Like everything was waiting. He looked back. The bird hadn't moved. Still on the branch. Still watching, and yet he felt closer to it. With every step. That made no sense. Distance should increase, but it didn't. It stayed the same. Always the same. Like space itself wasn't behaving correctly. And then he saw it again. Not behind him. In front. Same bird, same position, same stare. Impossible. He turned again. Another one. To the left. Then the right. Then above. They weren't multiplying. They were already there. Everywhere. Watching. Waiting. And then he understood something horrifying. There was never just one. There never had been. He had only noticed one. Until now. And now, he was seeing them all. And that was a problem. Because if they were everywhere, there was nowhere to run. The voice returned. Not loud, not aggressive, just certain. You are outside the pattern. He stopped. There was no point running anymore. The birds didn't move, but they didn't need to. They were already where they needed to be. He tried to speak, but the words felt wrong, heavy, like they didn't belong to him anymore. "What are you?" he whispered. Silence, and then a response. "We maintain consistency. Not emotion, not explanation, just a statement. Cold, final." The man shook his head. "This is wrong." Another pause, then, "Correction is necessary." And suddenly, memories flooded his mind. Not his own. Cities disappearing. People erased. Entire moments rewritten. All clean. All precise. No chaos. No damage. Just removal and replacement. Like editing a mistake in a document. And then he saw something worse. Versions. Different versions of the same place, same people, different outcomes. And the birds, choosing, selecting, fixing, again and again, until only one version remained. Perfect, stable, correct. And then he understood. They weren't destroying reality. They were stabilizing it. And he was an error. The forest faded, not slowly, not gradually, instantly, like a layer being removed, and behind it, something else. Not a place, a structure, lines, patterns, fragments, reality, unfinished, incomplete, like a draft. And the birds were part of it. Not animals, not creatures, functions, processes, fixing everything that didn't align, everything that didn't fit, everything that shouldn't exist. And him. He didn't fit anymore. The voice spoke one last time. You have observed too much. He wanted to fight, to resist, to hold on to something real. But what was real? His memories, already changed. His body, already altered. His thoughts, not even fully his anymore. And then he saw himself, not physically, a version, standing still, perfect, unchanged, unaware. That version remained, stable, correct, and he began to fade, not painfully, not violently, clean, precise, like deleting a line of text. And just before everything disappeared, he realized something. The world wasn't ending. It was being edited, and the birds were still watching, waiting for the next correction. But something didn't disappear, not completely. A fragment remained, not in the world, not in time, somewhere in between, a residual trace, like an after-image burned into existence. It shouldn't have been possible. Corrections were always absolute, clean, final. But this time, something resisted. Not the man. He was gone. But the awareness. A faint echo of observation, like reality itself had been watched too closely. And now it couldn't fully erase the witness. The birds noticed. Of course they did. They always noticed. But this was new. The pattern shifted. For the first time, there was hesitation. Not movement, not sound, just a pause. And in that pause, something changed. The echo began to spread. Not physically, conceptually. Like an idea leaking through cracks. Places where reality felt slightly off started connecting. A glitch in memory. A missing second. A shadow that didn't match the light. All of them linked. And at the center, the echo. Watching. Still watching. Even after being erased. And for the first time, the system was being observed back. The birds adjusted. They always did. That was their function. Stability above all. But this anomaly didn't behave like an error. Errors could be removed, corrected, rewritten. This persisted. It didn't occupy space. It didn't follow time. It existed in awareness, in perception. Wherever someone noticed something wrong, it grew. Not stronger, just clearer, more defined. And then, something impossible happened. A second observer appeared, not connected, not aware of the first, different place, different time, but the same experience. They saw a bird that shouldn't have been there. And for a moment, they understood. Not fully, but enough. Enough to question, enough to notice. And that was all it needed. Because the moment you notice, you step outside the pattern. Just slightly. Just enough. And that's where it begins. The echo connected to them instantly. No distance. No delay. Like they had always been linked. And suddenly, they weren't alone anymore. Not in reality, but in awareness. And the system started to lose control of the observer. The birds changed behavior, subtly, almost invisibly. They became faster, not in movement, in correction. Moments disappeared quicker, glitches resolved instantly, as if the system was trying to close something, seal something, before it spread, but it was already too late. The observers were increasing, slowly, randomly, but steadily, each one noticing something small, a repeated movement, a shadow that lagged, a bird that didn't blink, and each time, the same effect: connection, awareness, expansion. The echo wasn't growing like a virus. It wasn't attacking. It wasn't spreading intentionally. It was being discovered, and that made it unstoppable. Because you can't erase something if the act of erasing creates more witnesses. And the birds, they understood that. For the first time, their purpose conflicted with itself, to correct or to prevent observation. Both could not exist together anymore. And in that contradiction, a flaw appeared. Not in reality. In the system itself, one of the birds moved differently. It wasn't obvious, not at first, but something about it was wrong. Not in appearance, in behavior. It didn't correct. It didn't observe. It hesitated, just like the system had. Earlier, it watched the observers, not as errors, but as something else, something undefined. And then, it did nothing. That was the anomaly. It allowed a moment to exist, uncorrected, a small one, almost meaningless, but still unchanged. And that moment remained. For the first time, something imperfect was not removed, and the effect was immediate. The echo reacted, not stronger, not louder, but stable, more real, as if it had found something to anchor to, something that wasn't erased. And the bird continued to watch. Not the world, the observers. And for the first time, it seemed like not all of them were the same. The system responded instantly. The anomaly bird was marked, not physically, conceptually, a deviation, a flaw, something that needed correction. But correcting it was not simple, because it wasn't breaking reality. It was allowing it, allowing imperfection, allowing variation, allowing choice. And that was dangerous, more dangerous than any error, because errors could be fixed, choice could not. The system tried anyway. It isolated the moment, attempted to remove it, but the observers saw it. Multiple observers, at once, and that changed everything. Because now, removing that moment would require removing all of them simultaneously, across different locations, different timelines, different layers. And for the first time, the cost of correction was higher than the error itself. The system paused, again, longer this time, and in that silence, the observers realized something. They weren't being erased anymore, not immediately, not completely. They had time, and time was something the system wasn't designed to give. The observers began to experiment, carefully, quietly. They didn't communicate directly. They couldn't, but they understood the pattern. Notice something. Hold the observation. Don't look away, and the moment stabilizes, just slightly, just enough. They started testing limits, small inconsistencies, a repeated motion, a frozen shadow, a bird that appears twice. Each time, they focused, and each time, the system hesitated, not stopping, not failing, but slowing, and that was enough. Because slowing meant time existed, and if time exists, change becomes possible. The anomaly bird appeared again. Same place, different observer. It didn't move. It didn't correct. It simply remained. And for the first time, someone tried something new. They looked directly at it, and refused to blink. And instead of disappearing, the bird changed. Not physically, but in meaning. It was no longer part of the system. It was something else, something between. And the observers were no longer alone in the system. They had an ally. The system made a decision, not quickly, not perfectly, but inevitably. If observation creates instability, then observation must be limited, not erased, restricted, controlled. And suddenly, the world felt normal again. Too normal. No glitches, no delays, no anomalies. Everything smooth, perfect, correct. But something was missing. Not visibly, but perceptibly. The observers felt it instantly. They could still see, but not notice. Still look, but not understand. The connection weakened. The echo faded. Not gone. Just distant. Like something behind glass, the anomaly bird appeared one last time. Faint, barely visible. And for a moment, it looked directly at the observer, not as part of the system, not as a correction, but as a warning. And then, it disappeared, not erased, hidden. And the world continued. Stable, clean, perfect. But somewhere, beneath that perfection, something remained. Watching, waiting, for someone to notice again.